Today we're taking a look at the Transformers and Void Rivals San Diego Comic-Con 2025 convention exclusive set. Try to say that 3 times fast, it is pretty difficult. So this is the instruction booklet on how to transform Jetfire. Jetfire, as you can see, is on the left. The Void Rivals O-ring 3 3/4 inch action figures are on the right. Look how small they are, and we have a small pile. Why I don't have the box here, it's just the box is way too big for my area. Jetfire is pushing the limits. You can kind of see little bits of white on the left and the right side. He is pushing my limits right here. We're going to talk more about these figures down here than we are about him, because from what I understand, Jetfire is a recolor of a figure that came out a while ago. I don't follow Transformers very closely, and so the only ones I get are connected to, well, these O-ring type figures down here. So for the moment, we're going to get Jetfire out of here. We are going to focus in on the Void Rivals. Actually, really quick, before we jump over and just look at these figures, I want you to look at how tall Jetfire is next to these two. I think this is a pretty appropriate, it's been a while since I've read Void Rivals #1, but it seems like this is pretty appropriate sizing robot versus person, human, alien, whatever they are exactly. I can't remember off the top of my head. Now, you cannot put these figures inside this like the G.I. Joe crossover figures, which is a bit disappointing, but you know, I rarely put the G.I. Joe figures in those Transformers anyway. They are in robot form most of the time. I like this Jetfire next to this. I don't have this Jetfire, so to me, this is actually a really cool set. As soon as we get back to look at these figures, we'll discuss, is this worth how much they charged? So here are the Void Rival figures on their own, and they're on this little cutesy card. You can tell it's small and cutesy because these are the 3 3/4 inch figures. They're not that tall, and that's not a very large card compared to some other O-ring figures out there, old and new, that have a much bigger card. I'll bring this a little bit closer if you want to take a read at what is up there at the top. So it says, "War rages around the sacred ring, where the last remnants of 2 worlds have collapsed around a black hole in a never-ending war. However, when a pilot, who will call him Darak, I think is how you pronounce it, and his rival Solila both crash on a desolate planet, these 2 enemies must find a way to escape together. But are they alone on this strange planet? And what dark forces await that threaten the entire universe?" And I think you get the idea if they're alone or not, because when you look around here, who do you see but Jetfire in his comic glory back there? So yes, if you haven't read it, well, it's been out for a couple years now. I'm sorry, spoilers ahead. Jetfire is on the planet with them, and they come across him. I think it's Darak that finds him, if I remember correctly. It's interesting. I turn it this way. It looks like it's pretty straight, and then I rotate it around, and it's like crooked. But it's not a huge deal. But anyway, I believe it's Darak that finds him and unburies him, and I think he was going to try and use him for parts. It's been a long time. So enough about this. Shall we get this figure open? I'm just going to take a moment here and cut this thing open, because I want to see actually what the card, you know what? I'm making this so much harder. There's like a lovely piece of tape that I could cut right there. Knife safety, kids, don't cut towards yourself, cut away from yourself. There we go. Wow, that's kind of cheapo plastic. Cut away from yourself. There we go. I know that's a little bit difficult when you're cutting towards hands, but there we go. There we have the Jetfire, as well as you can see him. Art from the comic book. Pretty nice. All right, so snap. And I just cut towards myself. Oh, a bad example. Failing knife hit safety. Snap. And snap. Snap, snap. They leave the... Really? They put them around the hands, too? What are these, like Fort Knox figures? Man, that's like 4 straps per figure. They really think these figures are gonna get loose, apparently. Crinkle, crackle. Ooh, that one's really thick. There we go. Free. And I don't know. Look at this mess. Look at that mess all over. Let's get rid of that mess. get the figures out. We got a couple figure stands. They even put the figure stands. Man, they must really want to have a specific type of presentation. Let's get this out of here. Look at that. It's empty. All right, let's take a look at these figures right here. We'll stand them up. I'm just going to say, I think they're really cool. So I believe, if I remember correctly, the set's $115. I'm going to need to move that down so you can see it better. $115 for a Jetfire and these two figures. If they're selling these figures for about $20 each, then $40 of it is definitely these figures. What are Transformers nowadays? Are they like 40? Jetfire is huge. $40, $50, $60. So 60, that's about 100. You know, that might be pretty, if you don't have any of this stuff, it might be pretty okay. So here is Solila. Just kind of rotate her around just a little bit so you can see her better. I'm going to talk a little bit about the construction of these figures in just a moment. Here's Darak. And Void Rivals is actually a lot of fun. If you're not familiar with Void Rivals, it kind of snuck in out of nowhere from Skybound when they first when they took over the Hasbro license of Transformers and G.I. Joe. It was really interesting. Apparently they didn't, if I remember correctly, advertise it anywhere, and they just released it. Like, there was a lot of people who didn't really understand what Void Rivals was, and it ended up being the intro to the Transformer book, because Jetfire the Transformer was in it. And so that kind of launched like the Transformers comic book as they introduced Transformer characters in the first initial issues. Now, the story is actually pretty cool itself. It's kind of interesting and kind of different with these two opposing worlds. And I don't know, this spoiler alert, if I remember right, they're like the same race. They have these helmets and they don't realize they're like the same because they're from two opposing factions or something. Anyway, so let's take a look here. Darak has, well, I didn't rotate him around, did I? Oh, I did. But he is this little thing. This is like, I can't remember if this is like his little weapon that he can hold on to here. I know they've got these little comms on their wrists. That's interesting that they had to hook that thing on because he's not holding it otherwise. There are a couple figure stands, looks very G.I. Joe-like. And we've got this spear. I can't remember the spear. It's been a while since I've read the comic book, but I do remember that it was a lot of fun. We'll give her the spear, because it's blue. Anything blue, if I remember right, she gets. So what's interesting about these two figures is they are not completely and totally brand new. We've got parts from Zartan on Darak, and we have parts from the Baroness on Solila. And if you haven't figured out which ones, it is the legs on these, and I do believe, I'm looking here, I believe it's the waist pieces as well. The arms, the torsos, and definitely the heads are unique. So these are pretty standard O-ring figures. If you want him to sit, doesn't sit all that well. Has a bit of a bounce there in the hips. Arms go up, arms rotate, arms hinge at the elbows, and they rotate at the elbows as well. There is no new modern articulation like hand rotation or wrist rotation. The head goes back and forth, and unlike the Ghostbusters, actually no, I don't think there is a head bobble. No, I think these are back and forth. I'd have to open up these figures and take a look at them, which I just happen to have the screwdriver right here because I'm really curious what kind of neck construction these figures have. We're about to find out. The newer Hasbro figures have a ball joint, whereas I believe these ones right here were just a back and forth. Oh, interesting. So this is entirely new. This is an entirely different type of neck articulation. Look at that. That's a flat round piece. It's definitely just back and forth. There is no ball joint, no back and forth. That is fascinating. That one right there. That's interesting. So we'll slide it back in just like so. Oh, it's so cool. The one thing I like about Hasbro O-ring figures, you can always put the pieces like right in and they'll hook in while you replace the front of that torso. So that is a... Actually, I don't think I've ever taken Zartan apart. Kind of curious if they reworked Zartan for that same thing. This is going to be kind of like a side episode here where the video goes a little bit long because I just got curious. Come on. Knock, knock, knock. Anybody home? If I remember correctly, the original Zartan could not be taken apart. I didn't have the original Zartan, but I believe he was glued together. So this is actually like a modern, updated version of the original, like, early 80s articulation. There we go. So we'll put, you know what, let's not waste your time. We'll put them together later. So yeah, Darak and Solila. These are pretty cool. As I mentioned earlier, the height-wise with Jetfire, we're just going to put him here for the legs. We'll just have him standing here, hovering over him. We're not going to really talk about Jetfire because there's been a lot of videos, I'm sure, about Jetfire out there. The original version versus these new ones. They do come, there is an instruction sheet if you want to assemble Jetfire. You get some blast effects. I don't know if the original Jetfire had these. You get a large gun. That is most definitely for Jetfire. It's not for these guys. And then you get, absolutely, you get his legs. You get some wings. You get a head. You get an arm. You get a cockpit. You get the backpack blasting jet section. You get movable wings. You get all sorts of cool stuff. We're not here to talk about Jetfire because, like I said, you've talked about him, or not you, but people have talked about. I like these figures. So is it worth it to get this set? Like I said earlier, if you don't have any of these things, then yeah, it's probably worth it if you are a fan of Void Rivals and you don't mind this. Why did they do O-ring? Well, probably they created O-ring figures specifically to get the height of these figures compared to him, because they are pretty small compared to him. Is it because Hasbro suddenly likes and loves and can't get enough of O-ring action figures? No, I don't think that's it at all. Could they have done like the modern version of G.I. Joe articulation? Yeah, they could have done that, but that would make them, like a 1/4 of an inch taller, which you couldn't have that next to this Jetfire. So why did they do this? I don't know. Maybe they're trying to appeal to a certain group. I don't know exactly why. I'm just glad they did it. I would have been happy had they done modern articulation 4-inch figures. These absolutely could not have been 6-inch or 1/12 scale figures next to this Jetfire. You'd have had to have a much bigger Jetfire if you're trying to scale it more appropriately. I think small figures like this are really appropriate for this. And if you really like Void Rivals and you like what they've been doing, this might be fun to get Jetfire's legs and some figures and create like a little shelf display. They have the packaging kind of has some comic artwork. I'll throw that up there so you can see it. It has some comic artwork that you might find great for a display. But these are the Void Rivals and the Transformer, and the Void Rivals, I'll say one more time, cannot fit inside the vehicle mode of Jetfire. But I think these are pretty awesome. I really like these O-ring figures. They don't have fully what I would classify as modern O-ring articulation, unfortunately. In fact, their head, I would say, is a step backwards. But the designs are actually really cool. And what I mean by design, I mean torso, arms, and head. But even the paint for these lower legs, I think these were an excellent reuse of the lower legs. I think the paint looks really good. And yeah, I think it just works very, very well. So there are Darak and Solila from Void Rivals and Jetfire's legs from Transformers. I'll see you in the next video.